All right, everyone. Good afternoon. I am Autumn Shook. I'm the inspection manager for the Food Safety and Lodging Program within KDA. You are joining the second, and my lights just went off, the second of our monthly webinar series presentations. Last month, we did remote inspections, and this month, you're going to hear about reheating and cooling. We know your lives are very busy. Thanks for joining us. Our staff's always looking for an opportunity to connect with our food operators outside of the official inspections. We hope that this webinar series connects us. Just a couple of housekeeping items that we need to review. All the participant microphones are going to be muted throughout the webinar. You may submit your questions during the presentation, and we encourage it, by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Those questions will be monitored and answered by our team at the end of the presentation. Regulatory considerations, of course, covered today are those for operating in Kansas. Our 30-minute webinar is going to go really fast. It will be recorded and posted online, so you can check out last month's if you haven't seen it. After this session, you're going to receive an email with a link to complete a survey. So along with that, you'll get some additional resources that you can refer to. So we would appreciate you taking a couple minutes to provide that feedback for our future outreach times. So, all right, let's see. We have two speakers presenting today about cooling and reheating of foods. This team is based out of the South Central section of the state, but don't worry, inspections are the same no matter where your business is located. We have Michelle Hanna and Adam Evans presenting today. Let's hear from Michelle first.
Thank you for attending our cooling and reheating webinar. I am Michelle Hanna and my co-presenter is Adam Evans. Both of us are food, drug, and lodging inspectors servicing counties in South Central Kansas. I will begin our webinar by asking, what happens if foods aren't cooled and reheated correctly? Before becoming an inspector, I never knew there were specific cooling and reheating requirements, nor did I know that failure to follow these requirements could lead to a potential disaster. Bacteria can grow and produce toxins to a sufficient number to cause a foodborne illness, making your customers very sick. Proper cooling and reheating prevent illness and improve product consistency. Let's take a look at symptoms. So there's abdominal cramping, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting. Onset time of this is 30 minutes to 36 hours. It depends on the germ. Average time of onset is 8 hours. Infections take time to grow within the body or produce toxins. Preformed toxin cause illness much sooner, usually 1 to 4 hours after eating. So how do pathogens get in the food? They come from many different origins in the soil, environment, vegetables and raw and processed foods, meat and poultry, intestines of animals and humans. We cannot see, smell, or taste dangerous bacteria in our food. Knowing which foods are the most likely to cause problems, as well as adhering to the guidelines in the following slides, are the only ways to make our food safe. So what are the cooling requirements? First of all, we want to remove the product from heat quickly, but don't just set it down and forget about it. Take temperatures, stir the product, take more temperatures until the product reaches or gets down to 135 degrees. Now this is when the rapid cooling begins. So the temperature reduction from 135 down to 70 must be completed in 2 hours or less. This is the time and temperature range when bacteria grows and multiplies at the highest level. Once the temperature reaches 70 degrees, use the remaining time up to a total time of 6 hours to reduce the temperature to 41 degrees. So for example, if you reduce the temperature on vegetable soup from 135 to 70 degrees in 1 hour, you have 5 hours to reach 41 degrees. One more comment about requirements. Generally, we think of cooling as hot food reduced to cool food. Cooling requirements also apply to canned products, though, such as tomatoes and tuna. If they are at room temperature when opened, the canned foods must be cooled to 41 degrees in 4 hours. Before we look at cooling methods, I would ask that you stop and think about everything you cool and reheat in your restaurant. After the webinar, make a list. Do you know that they meet the cooling requirements? If you don't know or are unsure, do your own cooling studies using one or more of the various methods in the next few slides. Document temperatures and time. Pick a method that fits the products you cool. Each product may use a different method. Adding a new product to your menu that requires cooling, verify your cooling method meets the requirements. If you need help, all you got to do is call your KDA inspector for assistance. So let's take a look at some cooling methods. What cooling methods work? Ice is our friend in the foods business and can be used as an ingredient and cools in the process. Photo A shows ice used to cool rice. I have personally had businesses that make their own sauces, cook the concentrated portion, then use ice and water as an ingredient and also for cooling. This is a win-win. Photo B shows an ice paddle or an ice stick that you could purchase from your food vendor or online. These ice sticks help with cooling from the inside out. This is especially a good method for soups, gravies, sauces, and you also want to make sure that the ice stick is submerged, using the top of it to stir. Photo C shows using a metal pan in an ice bath with the ice as high as the liquid inside the pan and stirring to allow the heat to escape. Photo D shows a speed rack where various products are gapped to allow the cool air in a walk-in cooler to circulate around them. For the same reason, never stack products one on top of the other as heat will rise and these will not cool properly. Photo E shows a product spread into a shallow pan. This is a great method for thick products, followed by an ice bath. Photo F demonstrates how to vent properly by folding back a corner of foil or plastic wrap. You can also offset a lid, just need to make sure that nothing can fall into it. Photo G shows the same type of pan, but one is plastic and the other metal. Metal is a great conductor of hot and cold. Plastic works best as an insulator. In my personal home test, a metal pan versus a plastic one cooled 25% quicker. Blast chillers are an amazing addition to any kitchen that cools multiple products routinely. These chillers are rapid cooling experts and save money in labor and spoilage. Recently, I spoke with a kitchen manager that had just purchased a small one for $13,000 and shared that he could cool 80 pounds of chicken breast from 170 degrees down to 41 degrees in 35 minutes. Costs vary depending on the size of the unit. Like any other kitchen equipment, there are used units for sale as well. The blast chiller in this slide has probes that can be placed in 3 to 4 different items to cool. Again, dense products will take the longest to cool. This unit can cool or completely freeze the product. What's wrong with this picture? So let's review it for a little bit. What type of container conducts cold and heat best? Metal, right? So the plastic container would be the wrong application. Assuming the temperature of the content is above 70 degrees, should the product have a lid on it yet? I don't think so. We need to stir, stir, and stir some more. Is the high ice level high enough on the side of the product for rapid cooling? Could be better. Remember to have at least the ice even with the content. Finally, when do you vent a container? I recommend it after you have achieved a temperature reduction to 70 degrees or below, and the product is moved to a walk-in cooler versus placing it in a reach-in cooler. Note, multiple products cooling in the same reach-in cooler can spell disaster too. The heat will raise the overall ambient temperature of the reach-in cooler and increase the temperature of other products. Repeating this exercise on a regular basis will cause your reach-in cooler to freeze up and fail mechanically. So the pathogens of concern are Clostridium perfringens, which can be found in meat and poultry. Intestines of both animals and humans can survive high temperatures and lives in the environment. Bacillus cereus is found in the soil, on vegetables, and in raw and processed foods. The CDC estimates these two bacteria cause nearly 1 million illnesses each year just in the U.S. Use of proper cooling techniques will reduce those statistics and ensure your customers will save food. Now I'd like to turn the reheating section over to my fellow inspector, Adam Evans.
Thanks, Michelle. As Michelle mentioned, my name is Adam Evans, and I'm a food inspector in the south central part of Kansas. Today, I'll be covering the reheating portion of this presentation. So let's start with the reheating requirements. Reheat foods from 41 degrees to 165 degrees in 2 hours or less, and maintain that 165-degree temperature for at least 15 seconds. Once you reach 165 degrees for 15 seconds, it's then safe to begin hot holding your foods, which has a minimum holding temperature of 135 degrees. It's important to reheat foods to 165 and not the minimum holding temperature of 135 because we want to eliminate any pathogens that may be present due to contamination or improper holding or cooling. If your foods drop below 135 degrees at any point and into that temperature danger zone, please reheat them back up to 165 for 15 seconds. Direct heat, like the stovetop or your grill, is the best way to reheat food. Steam cookers, ovens, and microwaves are all acceptable to use as long as you're certain you can reheat foods to 165 in 2 hours or less. We don't recommend using steam tables or crock pots to reheat food. Steam tables are designed to maintain a holding temperature. They're not designed to reheat food products. Crock pots are slow cookers, and they'll reheat your foods too slowly. You more than likely aren't going to reach 165 degrees in 2 hours or less. If you use a microwave, make sure the container and cover are microwave safe. Cover the foods except for a small vent to allow steam to escape. Microwaves are notorious for producing cold spots, so make sure to stir the food during reheating to distribute the heat evenly. The temperature of the food will continue to rise for 2 minutes after you're done reheating, so let it stand during that time, at which point you will want to check the food in multiple places to ensure that it's evenly heated throughout and there are no cold spots remaining. Some pathogens of concern during reheating are Bacillus cereus, Clostridium perfringens, which Michelle covered earlier, and Staphylococcus aureus, or staph for short. It takes a long time to get to the reheating step. Food must first be prepped, cooked, it's potentially hot held, cooled, and stored. And then you finally get to that reheating step. And because it takes so much time to get there, there's an increased risk of contamination. Staph produces toxins that cannot be inactivated during the reheating process, so it's important to take steps to minimize the risk of contamination. Keep your food covered as much as possible. Cool your foods in areas of the kitchen to where there's not a lot of foot traffic. And of course, don't make any bare hand contact with the food. I wanted to talk a little bit about the equipment you use to monitor your cooling and reheating procedures. You can use a probe thermometer and a clock to monitor your time and temperature, which is perfectly fine. Or you can use a device called a data logger. Pictured here are two of our data loggers. Data loggers take a time and temperature of your food at set intervals, and then that information can be displayed in an easy-to-read graph so you can see if you're cooling or reheating your foods correctly. We highly recommend you purchase your own data loggers because they're relatively inexpensive, they're easy to use, and they can save you a lot of money in the long run. Our inspectors have experience using these devices, so if you'd like help using them, feel free to reach out to your local inspector. Here's an example of what one of their graphs looks like. I tried to reheat chili in a crock pot at home, and as you can see, after 2 hours, I'd set it at the highest setting and stirring every 30 minutes. The chili only reached a temperature of 158 degrees instead of the required 165 degrees. So you can see why we don't recommend using the crock pots to reheat food. In this scenario, we'd have to discard the food, which I did discard this chili. This next graph, I wanted to simulate an end of night scenario where someone might try to rush through the cooling process. I may or may not be guilty of this from time to time with my own leftovers. I tend to get in a hurry, or I may just not have a whole lot of time to cool after dinner. So what I did was I heated 2 quarts of water in a pot on the stove to 195 degrees. I then removed it from heat and let it set uncovered at room temperature for around 20 minutes. I then placed the pot in the fridge to cool overnight with the lid slightly ajar. The fridge had an ambient temperature of 38 degrees and was holding all other foods in the fridge at 39 to 40 degrees. You can see after 2 hours of reaching 135, the water had only cooled down to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. After 6 hours, the water had cooled to 55 degrees, and overnight, which was over a 12-hour period, the water was still tipping at 43 degrees. Again, this was just plain water, so you can imagine how much slower it would have been had there been an actual food item like, say, stew or refried beans. In this scenario, again, the food would have had been discarded. I was a little surprised by this because this was my own personal fridge. So afterwards, I definitely reevaluated my own cooling procedures at home. Today, we covered cooling and reheating, which are virtually the same process, just done in reverse of one another. The key for both is getting the foods out of that temperature danger zone as quickly as possible. Make sure you're cooling your foods from 135 degrees to 70 in 2 hours. And make sure you're cooling your foods to 41 in 6 hours total. Reheat your foods from 41 to 165 degrees in 2 hours or less. We recommend you evaluate your cooling and reheating procedures to ensure that you're meeting these requirements. If you'd like help with this, feel free to reach out to your local food inspector. They'll gladly help you with it. If you don't know who your local food inspector is, or you may have lost their contact information, you can contact our Manhattan office and they'll reach out to your inspector on your behalf. This concludes our presentation. I'll now throw it back to our moderator so we can answer any questions you may have.
Well, thanks very much, Michelle and Adam. Really appreciate you sharing that information with us. My name is Adam Inman. I am the Assistant Program Manager for Food Safety and Lodging here at the Kansas Department of Agriculture. And I'd like to introduce at this time Ms. Dana Ladner. She's our Compliance Education and Agency Program Support Manager. So Dana, we look forward to you helping us answer a lot of the questions that will be coming in.
Great, thank you very much, Adam. I do have some questions for you, but I also want to let our participants know that if there's something specific they would like to know, to go ahead and put that in the Q&A and we'll get that answered for you. So Michelle, I have a question for you. If I didn't get the product cooled down to 70 degrees within that 2 hours, do I have to throw the product out or are there other options?
Thanks for that question, Dana. Technically, yes. If it's not cooled down within 2 hours, we need to throw it out, discard it. The other option might be if you want to, from a food quality standpoint, you could reheat it back up to 165 and then start the cooling process all over again.
Thanks for that. So Adam, I'm going to transition back over to you. So she just said I could reheat it after cooling. How many times can food be reheated?
We don't have a set number of how many times you can do it, but keep in mind you can only keep food for 7 days once you prepare it. So do not exceed that 7-day limit. I personally wouldn't recommend doing it more than a couple times just because you're passing through that temperature danger zone repeatedly, going up and down, up and down. It just gets kind of dangerous the more times you do that.
In addition, that your quality can be impacted too. So the more times you reheat and cool, your quality is going to suffer. So maybe shifting your menus and doing batches that are maybe smaller would be something to consider that could help eliminate those other issues and improve quality as well.
Great. Michelle, I'm going to throw one back to you. With that, are there cooling requirements for canned meats?
Yes, I mentioned in our webinar that yes, they do have a 4-hour window. So when you open the can, we're going to say it's ambient temperature. So it's probably going to be somewhere around 72 degrees. So we have 4 hours to reach 41 degrees. Again, you can use some of the same methods that we talked about to reduce that temperature down to 41. Again, like Adam mentioned, you could break, if you had a large batch of anything, breaking it into smaller batches is going to help do that a lot faster. I just recently had a situation where I went into a restaurant and they had a pizza sauce that they had in a probably at least a gallon, maybe 2-gallon jug. And I asked the questions, how long has it been cooling? And it was like already 3 hours, but it was still 50 degrees. So I actually had them separated into smaller batches. And then they had one ice bath that they had that was set up really well and one that was not so good. So they got to see the difference in how much, even in an hour, one that where they were stirring both, but one had the ice all the way up to the side and the other one did not. And the one that did not have the ice all the way up along the sides actually failed, and we had to throw that portion out. So it is very important that you do follow the techniques that we talk about, because we've seen them tried and true. So back to you, Dana.
Great. Michelle, that's great that you take the time with those that you license to spend time to be able to educate them on some other opportunities as well. You know, that goes a long ways with customer service. So Adam, I'm going to kind of go back to this canned meat thing with it. Are there heating and reheating requirements for canned meat and canned vegetables?
Just make sure to follow those guidelines. We talked about getting it up to, well, if it's an initial reheat, 135 degrees. If it's a reheated product, make sure to get it to 165 for that 15 seconds and make sure to do it under 2 hours.
Good. Again, participants, if you have some specific questions for our regulatory team on here, our inspectors, go ahead and put those in the Q&A with it. Michelle, I have another question for you. Can freezing the hot product be part of the cooling process?
It can be. It's probably not our, a lot of times people like to just take whatever's hot and throw it in their freezer. Maybe not always the best method, because you want to continue to stir and get that even heating, or even cooling rather. But if you need to do it in maybe a short amount of time, bring it back out, stir it some more. And then, you know, get it to a point where you've made sure that you've reached that 70 degrees in 2 hours, because that's the most critical.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that a lot of freezers are designed to freeze product that's already cold or to maintain frozen. And so putting in hot food can overwhelm your equipment and cause a hardship on your equipment, and actually warm up other food temperatures that are in there, maybe thaw them out partially, and you could have some product quality suffer there. So really thinking about the type of equipment that's best suited for the process is important.
Great. Michelle or Adam, either one of you can jump in on this one. We had a question come in as, what's the best way to cool a large roast that you want to pre-cook for the next day? What's the best way to cool a large roast to be able to go ahead and serve it the next day?
I guess I can go ahead and take that one. I would actually separate it. I'm going to assume that you didn't tell me what you wanted to prepare, but I'm going to take a stab at thinking maybe you might do like a stew or something like that. So I would probably break that roast apart as much as you can. So you're taking it into smaller portions, and again, use the ice bath. You might also, especially if you have water in your next as an ingredient, you could, with what you're preparing the next day, you could also put some ice in there and help cool that down.
Well, good. We have the next question is, this one interests me. Can you store the canned good in the original can if heating and cooling is done correctly? Can you reuse that original can to store?
I will tell you that as far as storing, originally, if it's not been the seal's not been broken, I would absolutely, I tell people to use, especially like when they're making like a pizza sauce or sauces for like a Mexican type restaurant. They have a lot, like hot sauce, and I would have them, if it takes canned goods, I would have them put them in the refrigerator or the walk-in cooler the day before, and have that kind of on a rotation basis. But once it's opened, I would not reuse that to store the product in. Adam or Autumn, do you have any other comment on that?
I don't, but we got more information on your roast. Adam, you want to take more on that? Adam Inman?
I think that was going to be fun. Yeah, so roast can be challenging because you're trying to manage moisture and quality of the product as well, and it's typically a long drawn out process. The thing to keep in mind with the roast, got to cool it down quickly, meet those parameters. 6 hours total from 135 to 41, hitting 70 degrees in the first 2 hours. The reheating can be done; it needs to be done quickly, but you can also follow the same parameters as cooking, and those can be modified for a meat roast. So it's a little more technical question. Probably be good to work with them directly and look at their process specifically and review that with them. So Ashley, if you could connect us, give us that information, we'd be happy to reach out to them and help them. Or if you could coordinate that, we'd appreciate that help as well. As to the canned goods storage, they're not really intended to be stored there. It's not the end of the world if it's covered and handled properly. But as Michelle said, probably wouldn't save the can to the side and then reuse it. Say if you're just opening a can and then cooling it down, that'd be one thing, but reusing the can would not be recommended.
We have a few questions that have come in and we're really getting close on our time. Dana, what's our process with this?
If you want to go ahead and ask that one that came in from Anne, I'll look at the other two and see what I can do to combine them, and then we'll be about done for our time period.
Okay, so there was a question that came in asking about the cooling of foods that have been cooked via sous vide and reheating using sous vide. So the same parameters apply for cooling of those and reheating of those products. So the struggle is being able to confirm that those food items are reaching them without puncturing the bag. I think there's bags, Adam Inman, you might be able to speak on this, that they have like it seals once you put your thermometer in. I mean, I'm sorry, I haven't personally used one.
Yeah, so there's foam tape that's available, and you take a representative portion and you put the foam tape where you're going to insert the probe thermometer through that, and that most of the time will maintain the seal on that. But as Autumn said, the parameters still apply. And just some extra concerns there we need to make sure with the sous vide products.
Just make sure that the quantity that you're trying to cool or reheat isn't like huge in a bag. You want the smaller quantities to be able to reach those two different parameters. So there was a really great question about cooling. Adam Inman, sorry, we have two Adams on the call today. She was talking about, is it 6 hours? Is it 4 hours? And so I think that's, or even Adam Evans or whoever can take that.
Yeah, so the one typed the answer there, but to reiterate it, it's 6 hours total from from the 135 to 41, and you got to hit 70 degrees in the first 2 hours. If you're cooling from room temperature, so maybe making tuna salad, you would to go from room temperature to 41 degrees, that would be required 4 hours for that. And then that first 2 hours, that's another question that came in, 70 degrees within the first 2 hours, as Michelle mentioned, that's the most important. That's where we see the most growth of bacteria and toxin formation that can make people sick. So that's really the most important. If you don't hit that within the first 2 hours, you need to discard that product because you're not going to be able to recondition it. So monitoring it initially, and if you're coming up to 2 hours and you haven't hit it, then you can try to reheat it, get it to 165 and start over again. But if it's past 2 hours, you need to discard that product.
Great. We have two last questions we need to go to. So Adam Evans, we have a question about ice cream. What temperature does it have to be on when it's in the hopper of the soft serve machine? And can you still serve it if it gets close to the degree it needs to be?
When I check those machines, I open the hopper. I always check to make sure it's temping at 100 at 41 degrees or less. If it goes above that, then you're going to want to get the machine serviced. You're going to want to do something to rapidly cool that product down. That's something your inspector will be able to handle a little bit better, given the circumstances and knowing what you have to get it cooled down to that product temperature 41.
Yeah, to add on to that, to follow the manufacturer's directions. Some of those machines are designed to actually heat up the product, the mixture, to stop the cycle, stop killing the bacteria that might have contaminated it from the environment, and then cool it back down quickly. So make sure you understand the manufacturer's use direction on that. And as Adam mentioned, we'd be happy to work with you on any specific questions that you have further on a particular machine.
Great. Michelle, the last question in the Q&A, if you could just go back over quickly on how long you can hold items at 135 to 140 degrees before you run into safety concerns with it. Example, like on a smoked brisket.
So that's a good question. Typically, when we ask people how long they hold product, usually just from a quality standpoint, they're not going to hold it there generally more than like 4 hours because it's going to start to get dry. Your product quality is going to suffer. But other than that, I mean, I don't personally know of any time frame other than unless it drops below, and then you've got to reheat it, and at that point, it's probably ready to be discarded. So I don't know of an actual time frame. As long as you keep it above 135, I don't know of any other time frame to associate with that. It's mainly going to be your product quality that's going to be your telltale of when to throw it away.
Well, thank you very much, Michelle and Adam, on presenting today. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the food safety team.
Awesome. Thank you, Dana. And thank you, everyone involved today. Thanks for attending today's session. This recorded session will be posted on our website, and we did put that in the chat so everyone has that link. So the same link for recorded last January session and this one and the future ones. But next month is going to be covering food trucks and more. So make sure that you register if you haven't already, and look for that survey in your email box to assist us with planning future outreach sessions. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining.